Even in the darkest of times, there is always a tiny glimmer of hope waiting to be found. We tell the stories of those who followed the light and found their way through the storm to a better tomorrow. Hit subscribe now and keep the hope alive.
My daughter said his name. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold, listening to her voice on the phone, bright, breathless, happier than I'd heard her in years. She was laughing as she said it, like it was the best news in the world. And maybe to her it was, but to me, that name, Daniel Hartwell, was the name I had spent 3 years trying to forget. Dad, you still there? I forced myself to breathe. I'm here, sweetheart. Tell me everything. My daughter's name is Claire. She's 34 years old, a physical therapist, kind to her core, the kind of woman who remembers everyone's birthday, who leaves groceries on elderly neighbors' doorsteps without saying a word. She got that from her mother. Her mother, who passed 6 years ago and left a hole in this family that none of us have ever quite figured out how to fill. Since then, it had been just the two of us, and I had done everything a father could do. I showed up. I stayed present. I listened even when I didn't understand. I watched her grieve, watched her rebuild, watched her slowly open her heart to the world again. And now she was telling me she was engaged to him. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I am not the kind of father who meddles. I am not the kind of man who thinks his daughter needs saving from every relationship she chooses. Claire is smart and capable and has always known her own mind. In 63 years of living, I have learned that the fastest way to push someone toward the wrong person is to tell them they can't have him. So I did not say what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, this man destroyed someone I loved, and he will destroy her too. What I said was, that's wonderful news, Claire Bear. When do I get to meet him? She came over the following Sunday with Daniel at her side, and I want to tell you, I want to be honest with you, he looked good. That was the first thing I noticed, and the thing that unsettled me most. He was tall, well-dressed, easy smile, firm handshake. He looked me in the eye when he spoke. He complimented the house and asked genuine-sounding questions about the photographs on my mantel. He was charming in the way that certain people are charming. Effortlessly, instinctively, like breathing. Claire watched him the entire time with this soft glow in her eyes, the kind of glow you can't fake and can't argue with. I served dinner. I kept my hands steady and my voice warm, and all the while, in the back of my mind, I was turning over everything I knew about Daniel Hartwell. Here's what I knew. 3 years ago, my closest friend, a man I'd known for 30 years, a man who'd been a groomsman at my wedding and a pallbearer at my wife's funeral, came to me with something broken in his face I had never seen before. His name is Robert, and Robert is not a man who falls apart easily. He is steady, methodical, the kind of man who fixes problems rather than talks about them. But that night he sat at my kitchen table, and he told me what had happened to his family. His daughter, his only child, 29 years old at the time, had spent 2 years in a relationship with a man who had quietly, systematically dismantled her life. It started with small things, Robert said. The man had opinions about her friends, then about her job, then about how often she called home. By the time Robert understood what was happening, his daughter had left her career, cut off her closest friends, and moved across the state. She had become unrecognizable. The man's name was Daniel Hartwell. Robert showed me photographs. I didn't forget the face. It took his daughter 14 months to get out. Even after she did, she spent another year in therapy, rebuilding the parts of herself that had been quietly taken apart piece by piece. Robert told me she still struggles, that some mornings she wakes up and doesn't trust her own judgment, that she second-guesses decisions she never used to think twice about. That is what this man does. That is who he is. And now he was sitting at my dinner table, complimenting my pot roast and making my daughter laugh. After they left that evening, I sat in my armchair for a long time without turning on the television. I thought about what Robert had told me. I thought about my daughter's face. I thought about my wife and about what she would have done. She would have acted, quietly, carefully, and without hesitation. The next morning I called Robert. He answered on the second ring. When I told him, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said very quietly, "Are you sure it's him? Same name, same face, I'm sure." Another silence. "She's going to think you're lying," he said, "or that you're overreacting. That's what he does. He gets there first. He makes people feel like anyone who questions him is the problem." I knew Robert was right. I had watched it happen to his own family. The moment I walked up to Claire and said, "I don't trust this man," Daniel would already have the higher ground. He would seem reasonable. I would seem like an overprotective father who couldn't let go. So I did not go to Claire. Not yet. What I did instead was this. I started paying attention. I am 63 years old, and I spent 31 years as a high school history teacher. People sometimes underestimate what that means. It means I have spent 3 decades watching how human beings interact under pressure. I know how to read a room. I know the difference between confidence and performance. I know when someone is telling a story and when someone is managing a narrative. Over the next 3 weeks, I found reasons to be around them. Dinner at Claire's apartment, a birthday lunch for her colleague, a Saturday afternoon at a farmer's market she'd invited me to. I watched Daniel. I watched him the way I used to watch students I suspected were cheating. Not obviously, not accusatorially, just steadily, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself. And it did. It was never anything dramatic. That's the thing I want you to understand. It is never dramatic at first. It is a small correction when Claire told a story slightly wrong. It is a glance when she laughed too loudly. It is a hand on her arm that looks affectionate but functions as a pause button. It is the way he answered questions that were directed at her, smoothly, naturally, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Claire didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she noticed and had already learned to accept it. That thought kept me up more nights than I can count. The farmer's market was when I saw something I couldn't explain away. Claire ran into an old friend, a woman she'd worked with years ago, a warm, energetic woman who grabbed her hands and said they absolutely had to catch up. And why didn't they do dinner next week? Claire's face lit up. She said yes before she'd even finished thinking about it. Daniel smiled the entire time. He shook the woman's hand. He said all the right things. And then, on the walk back to the car, I watched him. I was half a step behind them. Claire was half a step behind them. Claire was still glowing from running into her friend, and Daniel put his arm around her shoulder, leaned in close, and said something I couldn't quite hear. Whatever it was, the glow went out. By the time they reached the car, Claire had taken out her phone and was typing something. Canceling, I would later learn. Something came up, so sorry, let's try another time. The dinner never got rescheduled. I needed more than my own observations. I needed something Claire could hold in her hands. I called Robert again and asked him if his daughter would be willing to speak with me. He called me back that evening and said she would. Her name is Melissa, and she drove 3 hours to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between our cities. She was quiet and precise, and she had clearly thought carefully about what she wanted to say. She brought a folder. Inside were text messages, emails, a journal she'd kept during the relationship, the entries growing shorter and more fragmented as the months went on. She also brought a written statement, dated and signed, describing what had happened to her. She had kept all of it, she told me, because her therapist told her that documentation was a form of protection. That if she ever needed to explain herself, she would have proof that her memory was not faulty. "He's very good at making you doubt yourself," she said. "That's the first thing you need to know. Whatever your daughter tells you she believes it completely. He's been shaping what she believes for months." I asked her how long it had taken before she first noticed something was wrong. "About a year in," she said. "By then, I'd already lost most of my friends. I didn't even realize they were gone until I looked around one day and there was no one left to call." I drove home that afternoon with a folder on my passenger seat and a heaviness in my chest that felt something like grief. I thought about going to Claire immediately. I had the folder, I had Melissa's statement, I had everything I had observed myself, but something made me wait. Something Robert had said stayed with me. He gets there first. If Daniel somehow knew I was building a case, he would move first. He would plant something in Claire's mind before I had a chance to speak. I needed to choose my moment carefully. What I did not expect was that the moment would choose me. It was a Thursday evening, about 5 weeks after that Sunday dinner, when Claire called me in tears. Not dramatic, heaving tears. Claire has never been one for performances. These were the quiet kind. The kind that come after you've already been crying alone for a while and have run out of reasons to keep it private. She said she and Daniel had fought. She said she wasn't sure what she'd done wrong. She said she felt confused and tired and like she was always saying the wrong thing lately. I asked her to come over. She arrived 40 minutes later. I made tea. I did not say anything about Daniel for the first hour. I just let her talk. I let her explain the fight from her perspective. And as she did, I recognized every beat of it. The way it had started over something small. The way it had somehow become about a pattern of her behavior. Not a single incident. The way she'd ended up apologizing though she couldn't quite remember what she was apologizing for. The way she'd felt afterward, like something had been decided without her. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Tell me I'm not crazy, Dad." I put my hand over hers. I said, "You are not crazy. You have never been crazy. And there are some things I need to show you." I got the folder. I want to tell you that she believed me immediately. I want to tell you that she looked at the documents and everything clicked into place and she thanked me and we cried together. And that was that. But that is not what happened. What happened was messier and harder and more real than that. She looked at the photographs of Melissa's documents. She read the statement. And then she sat back and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Something between devastated and defensive. "How do I know this is real?" she said quietly. "You can meet her," I said. "She drove 3 hours to give me that folder. She'll talk to you directly if you want. Dad." She pressed her fingers to her forehead. "He told me you might do something like this." There it was. I had known it was coming. Robert had warned me. But hearing it still landed like a stone. "What did he tell you?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. "That you have a hard time with change. That since Mom died you've been protective. That you might not be able to handle me building a life with someone." I stayed very calm. That was the most important thing I did in that entire conversation. I stayed calm because the version of me that wanted to react, that wanted to say, "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear what he's done to you?" That version of me would have lost her. He knew that. He had built exactly that trap. "Claire," I said, "I am not asking you to believe me because I'm your father. I'm asking you to believe Melissa because she was you 2 years ago. She sat exactly where you're sitting. She felt exactly what you're feeling. And she almost didn't get out." Claire stared at the table for a long time. "I need to think," she finally said. She left without finishing her tea. She didn't answer my calls for 4 days. Those 4 days were the longest of my life. Longer than the days after my wife's diagnosis. Longer than the funeral. Because at least in those moments I knew where Claire was, and I knew she was safe. These 4 days I knew nothing. I did not know if Daniel was with her. I did not know what he was saying. I did not know if the door I had cracked open was already being sealed shut again from the other side. On the 5th day she called. Her voice was different. Not broken, something more specific than that. It was the voice of someone who has looked at something they didn't want to see and made the decision to keep their eyes open anyway. "I called her," Claire said. "Melissa, I found her number through your phone from the call log." "I hope that's okay." "Of course it is," I said. "We talked for 2 hours. A pause. "She knew things, Dad, about how he speaks, about the way certain conversations go. She knew things that she couldn't have known if she'd just been making it up. I didn't say anything. I let her have the space. She said something to me," Claire continued. "She said, the scariest part isn't the things he does. It's that you stop being able to tell the difference between what you think and what he's told you to think. And Dad, when she said it, Her voice broke slightly, then steadied. "I've been sitting with that for 3 days, and I think she's right. I think I've been sitting with that for a long time without having the words for it." She ended the engagement 4 days later. I was not there when it happened. She did not want me there, and I understood that. This was hers to do. She had to do it in her own words, on her own terms, with her own strength. And she did. Daniel did not take it quietly. There were calls, messages, a long letter that Claire forwarded to me without comment. It was articulate and persuasive, and framed her as someone who had been manipulated by outside voices, meaning me, into throwing away something real. It was, in every way, exactly what I would have expected from him. Even at the end, he was still working the narrative. Claire did not respond to any of it. She came over the Saturday after, and we sat on the back porch and had coffee and watched the backyard go through its slow, quiet business of being a backyard. Birds, wind in the oak tree her mother had planted. The comfortable silence of two people who know each other well enough not to fill it. After a while she said, "I keep thinking about how close I came." "I know," I said. "If you hadn't." She stopped. "If I hadn't listened." I thought about Melissa driving 3 hours with a folder. I thought about Robert's face at my kitchen table 3 years ago. That look of something broken that I had never seen on him before or since. I thought about my wife and how she would have handled all of this. Probably better than I did. Probably with more grace. Certainly with more intuition. "You listened," I said. "That's what matters." She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to when she was small, and the world had been unkind to her, and she needed to remember that not everything in it was unkind. We stayed like that for a while. I want to say something to anyone watching who recognizes any part of this story, not as a dramatic story about a villain and a rescue, because that is not what it was. It was slow and imperfect and full of moments where I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. There was no single moment of triumph. There was just a folder and a phone call and a woman named Melissa who kept her documents because her therapist told her that documentation is protection. If you are a parent watching this and something feels wrong, trust that, not aggressively, not with ultimatums, but quietly and steadily. Build the case before you make the argument. Choose your moment. And most importantly, be the kind of parent your child can come back to. Because they will come back. But only if you haven't burned the bridge getting there. And if you are someone who recognizes your own life in Melissa's story, in Claire's story, I want you to hear this clearly. The confusion you feel is not a flaw in your thinking. It was put there deliberately. Your judgment is not broken. It was borrowed from you, slowly, by someone who needed you not to trust it. You can take it back. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens the way most real things happen. In a phone call that lasts 2 hours. In a folder someone drove 3 hours to hand you. In a quiet Saturday morning on a back porch, leaning against someone who never stopped believing you could find your way back to yourself. It happens one honest moment at a time. My daughter is back. Not the version of her that existed before all of this. That version is gone, and I don't think we should mourn her. The woman who came out the other side is sharper, more deliberate, more certain of her own instincts than she has ever been. She calls me every Sunday. She had dinner last week with a friend from the farmer's market, and last Tuesday, completely unprompted, she sent me a text that said simply, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone down on the kitchen counter, next to a mug of coffee that had already gone cold, and I let myself feel every bit of it. Some things are worth the wait.